Well, people were marching in the streets yesterday. They had legitimate grievances. Abuse of any kind is repugnant. Violence of any kind is repugnant. In the world of yesterday, no man could abuse a woman in any way and expect to get away with it, and nor should he today. But there was one key issue above all this in yesterday's protests and marches. People fought for the freedom to protest and the freedom to march. Those people we call our vets. And they also are experiencing massive workplace injustice, but they have no voice. If you are active in the services and you march in protest, your job's gone. It's an effective resignation note. And if you're too old or too damaged, you can't express your grievance. And even when you do, no one listens. Which brings us back to this Brereton report. Allegations against parliamentarians, we are told, must admit the presumption of innocence, correct? Allegations in the Brereton report were brutal truths. Vets have lost their jobs, been stood down, lost pay. Vets have been told they're not wanted, sacked. Their mental health is shocking. But these gutless wonders who head up the Defence Force, and that's the only way they can be described, the Chief of the Defence Force, Angus Campbell, has never fired a weapon in anger. They are brazen in their brutal treatment of vets. We should be marching in the streets for them as well. One wife made this very valid point when I said these men who have been quote-unquote sacked on the basis of the Brereton report should be reinstated and allowed access to the law that the Prime Minister rightly is talking about. One wife has written, and I quote exactly, Alan, it's way more complicated than that. Most of the men saw early on that they would have to initiate getting a medical discharge, as they clearly understood that the government was going to use them as cannon fodder. Even with these termination notices, some, not all, of the men have started down the road of medical discharge as their mental health has deteriorated so badly due to the Brereton interrogations. She wrote, I learnt last night that if the boys are in the process of a medical discharge, then Army will not follow through with the termination from work, as the men are effectively doing the Army's dirty work and leaving. So the Army will be able to turn around in the future and say, we didn't get rid of these blokes. They left of their own accord, when in reality they were forced out with no other option, as the very public trial by media has let these men vulnerable and with no other option but to leave, as the Army had bullied them so badly. She said to me, Alan, I'm not sure how to approach all of this from a political standpoint, but from where we are and where a lot of the men sit, the Army has won. They've bullied us all out with no repercussions to them. Reinstating us all is no longer an option. I think this is some of the most disgusting and disgraceful behaviour I've ever encountered in any government operation. The Chief of the Defence Force, Campbell, should be sacked yesterday and take the rest of his starched shirt brigade with him. Last week there was a symposium in Canberra coordinated by the Office of the National Commissioner for Defence and Veteran Suicide Prevention. The theme was Defence and Veteran Suicide Prevention by Understanding. Heston Russell, we've spoken to often. He's 34, a former officer in the immensely demanding SAS. He knows the mental toll inflicted by years of service. He also knows the damage caused to veterans by trying to navigate the Veterans Affairs system. He's a third-generation soldier. He served in East Timor, Iraq and Afghanistan, but as an SAS officer, he can't reveal the detail. But as he says poignantly, no war damages a young man more than the war he must fight on the home front when he returns, unquote. Heston was present at the symposium last week, and in the wake of the protests yesterday, I thought I'd give the veterans a voice where culture in the Defence Department and the services has been on the nose for years. Heston Russell, thank you for your time. Why on earth do you need a symposium when we know 700 veterans have taken their lives since 2001?
Well, good evening, Alan. That's a very good question, and a question asked by a number of people, particularly as we sat at the symposium and listened to some very incredibly educated doctors and professors who, Professor Sandy McFarlane summed it up better. How much more research and reports and recommendations need to be published before the government simply acts on what has been printed in black and white to start preventing suicides tomorrow?
Well, I know. I mean, we've got all these people, suicide prevention advisors to the Prime Minister. What do? There's not a lot of success in preventing suicide. But I mean, I see one speaker said many of the issues contributing to the suicide rate within the veterans community are not mental health issues, but could be traced to, quote, an accumulation of physiological stress commonly experienced by veterans, particularly during the transition from the military to Veterans Affairs support systems. That's it. I mean, why can't Heston, the minister, and this bloke Campbell understand this?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. You quote, Christine Morgan. She was fantastic. She's actually the national advisor to the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And this is what we've been saying for so long. There are pragmatic actions and processes and interventions that could be taken today and tomorrow. But what we continue to see is the government provide distraction, provide paint and trying to cover over these gaps and holes that are only widening and have been widening for generations. And at the same time, inflicting further moral injury and moral trauma on those veterans who don't feel respected, who don't feel their government is literally not reading the reports that taxpayers are paying millions of dollars to be completed and seeing the same occurrences time and time again, and we continue to lose our peers.
I mean, see yesterday, the protests, Heston, were about the workplace, the parliamentary workplace and the culture in that workplace and the way the worker is being treated. Now, the workplace for you people is the battlefield. And you have said it better than anybody. The biggest war you have to fight is the war you fight on the home front when you return. I mean, how come someone doesn't understand this?
Yeah, Alan, it's been quite the journey, and there's been a lot on the veteran community to speak up more and help demonstrate our position. But, you know, I'm here in Canberra meeting with members from both sides of the government, and as you could imagine, it comes down to those who actually listen and actually care.
Yeah, quite.
This afternoon, I attended a round table chaired by Luke Gosling from the Labor Party and Philip Thompson from the Liberal Party.
They're good men.
And Alan, Minister Taryn Chester was there for 30 seconds to tell the assembled group with hundreds of years of service amongst them that he unfortunately couldn't be there for the entire time because he was predisposed with another event and ran out. I mean, this is the simple facts. That until we can have the minister hold his department accountable, how are we going to be serious about actually taking actions to prevent suicide?
They're not serious. See, Heston, these men, the public need to know, there are men singled out from the Brereton report with no access to the principles of justice, and they're suffering in this way now. There is no relief, no support, no understanding. Didn't Campbell personally promise a letter to Erin Brown, who had widespread publicity recently of multiple sexual assaults during her time in the Navy? Erin Brown, I know, contacted you at the symposium. Has she received the communication from the Chief of the Defence Force?
No.
Unbelievable.
Erin saw that the Chief was there via my social media and simply stated, actions speak louder than words. He has still not contacted me, as he happily put in the newspaper on that weekend.
And Campbell wasn't present for the afternoon period of the symposium when research data was presented, and neither the Department of Veterans Affairs nor Defence provided any account, am I right, or any update of their actions and efforts or responsibilities in combating this suicide crisis for vets.
No, Alan, it was a research forum to help provide better understanding of the issues at hand. And unfortunately, as I've spoken to you, a number of parents of veterans who have taken their own lives to suicide in the last few years actually left with comments such as, when are we going to start talking, stop talking, and when are we going to start acting?
Do something. See, now, the national president of the RSL is the most funded and longest standing ex-service organisation. The national president was absent, wasn't he?
Yes, I'm unsure if he dialed in online, but there was no comment from the largest national body that, as you say, Alan, is very, very well funded. And this, unfortunately, continues to be a gap growing in the veteran community, particularly at that national level and that national representation required for veterans to government.
But just coming back, Heston, look, no one speaks to you. I guess you try to speak to them. But as Professor McFarlane said, how much more research is needed to action the recommendations that already exist?
Yeah, that's it, Alan. And unfortunately, until the veteran community feels respected by the government, even sees some of these recommendations that have been there for 2 to 3 years followed through, the moral injury and the respect and the hope for those who take their own lives out of not having hope is not going to repair. And the best thing the government could do would be to call a Royal Commission tomorrow if the Prime Minister was serious about saving even one more veteran life from suicide.
Good on you. Well, I'm just simply saying there were people legitimately marching in the streets yesterday because of the state of play in their workplace and the damage that's being done to people. Mental, emotional, psychological, professional. Here are people who can't march in the streets, and all that damage has been done year after year after year. Congratulations on what you do. We'll talk again, Heston. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your support, Alan.
Not at all a source of national shame, is that not? Heston Russell.